All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight for the book launch of Becoming Wild, Essays on Self and Society by Alayna Cole. Very excited to have you all here tonight. So now is the only moment that we can tangibly influence as individuals and as a society. Technology, and Alayna, you might know these words very well. Technology is evolving exponentially. Human rights are also arguably better than they have ever been. Despite the unprecedented nature of this moment, however, history repeats itself. Amnesty International found in its 2022-23 report that human rights are being eroded globally, with increases in global conflict and war crimes, double standards of wealthy nations regarding issues like healthcare and refugees, and legislation impacting people's access to medical abortion or ability to seek gender-affirming care. Scientific advancement, technology, and global connectivity has completely transformed what it means to be a human, like sand that has melted into glass. We've been displaced from the natural world we once inhabited, instead becoming caged by the guilt and shame that we often feel for choosing to be ourselves. But just as glass can return to the ocean and be reshaped by the tides into something magical, we can choose to reconnect with the cycles of the earth, rediscover our history, and reimagine ourselves. When we are taught to think and behave in particular ways, it can feel rebellious or wild even, to pause, reflect, and dare to question that reality. Alayna Cole's unconventional memoir weaves research and stories about witchcraft, marginalization, diet culture, hysteria, phytochemistry, home appliances, tarot cards, herbal medicine, neurodivergence, chronic illness, and the moon, to give insight into how we can each find our unique way of becoming wild. Welcome everyone to tonight's book launch. Super excited to have you all here. I'm going to kick things off with a few questions for Alayna, and then afterwards you guys will have a chance to question the author yourself. So Alayna, what is your background and what do you usually write about?
My background is fairly diverse, as is the topics that I write about. I think that, in my day job, I work in the games industry, and a lot of the people who find themselves there have a very eclectic sort of a background, a lot of different skills that kind of lead you to that place. And so I tend to explore a whole bunch of different topics, a whole bunch of different genres, and then I have a really eclectic background. So I've worked in universities, I've taught at both high school and university. I ran a not-for-profit for a while. Now I work in games. I've done some journalism. I've done some other things. Like, it's just, that mix of experiences that I feel kind of makes the work that I produce quite unique, because it comes from a fairly unique mix and blend of things.
Yes.
And in terms of, what sorts of things I normally write, I mean, this is my 4th published book now, and it comes after 2 textbooks and 1 short story collection, which is fiction. And then this is kind of a creative memoir, nonfiction thing. So, I'm kind of always trying to do interesting blended things with that. My textbooks are trying to be very approachable. My short story collection has a pretty intense kind of afterword full of theory and critical kind of analysis. And then this is kind of personal story mixed with, it has 499 citations in a pretty tiny little thing. So, always try to kind of blend those genres and those experiences.
Yes, certainly. Like, it's unbelievable that you fitted all of that into one little book. Like, you've got so many big ideas for all of us to savor in there. What actually led you to write this style of book and the content that's in this book?
So this book started as a collection of research for me. It didn't start as a book at all. And as you kind of read, you'll start to see there's some interesting themes per chapter, where one of them is really exploring gender and the gender that I am, and then one's really exploring my health and the experiences I have with chronic illness and disability. And as I was learning about those different things over the last I don't know, 4 or 5 years or so, I just had this running document that I'd been adding research and things to, because I'm the kind of person who, when they go to a doctor and they say, hey, we think you might have this, or, oh, have you considered that? Or, I have certain experiences, or I listen to a podcast and they say something that resonates with me. I'm the kind of person who needs to write that down somewhere so that I can go back to it and think about it. And as I started to kind of put all these things together, I realized that there was this thread of really like trying to understand who I am, trying to understand how I fit into this world that I'm in. And all of these really disconnected sort of topics were, for me, really integrally tied together, because the connective tissue for them was me. And so I was like, how can I create something that shares all of these things that I find really interesting and then makes them seem like they are related to each other? And the answer to that was to use my own personal stories to kind of show the ways that these can all be part of a person and create kind of this intersectional and interesting identity, but still be very like founded in research and founded in fact. Because I wanted it to be a book that people who have a similar experience to me in one or several of these facets could actually get something from. So it's not just about my story and learning about me. I'm not quite that self-centered yet, and I am, quite young. I haven't got the kind of, I don't want to go around being like, here's my whole life story, and then what do I do with my life? But it was just that it became a memoir because that for me was the thread to connect these different topics and these facts and research that I was finding really interesting. And so it became this kind of mix of deep research and personal story.
Yeah, that's super interesting that you say that, because you talk about the connectivity and like that research that kind of grounds you into who you are. And from that, like, and you do say in the like we had in the blurb, you say that being yourself is a rebellion against the norms of society about what people think you should be or shouldn't be, or how you should behave. So tell me, what does it mean for you to become wild? Like, how does that look for you?
It's funny. The title Becoming Wild was one of the last things that we did, and it took a bit of back and forthing, because again, like, this is so many different disconnected topics that it felt very challenging for a bit there to be like, okay, what is the essence of this? What is the thing that I can distill all of this into? And part of that was my experience, but also like, what was it that was drawing me at this point in my life to each of these topics? And I realized that it was finding myself and figuring out who I am in a context where the answers to that question of who am I are not always the answers that society would like me to have. And so it's one of those things where, like, I come from a background where I was raised Christian. I was at a fairly straight-laced school. I didn't have great exposure to a lot of the ideas that I explore in this book. And so for me, understanding that my religious beliefs don't need to be Christian or atheist, which was kind of what I was taught, that there are other kinds of spirituality, was part of that act of finding myself and rebelling against what I was shown as the pathway I could follow. Same with things like understanding my queer identity and my feelings there. Going through school, it was, straight or nothing for a long time, and then it was straight or gay. And now, like, as I've kind of grown older, and in the last decade, I've learned there's so much more than that. And so again, finding this area that I could carve out for myself and settling into that space and figuring out who I am, and not just I think that some people find some of the topics I explore in this book, like having a disability or having autism and ADHD, as like shameful things that you like. And I talk about this in the book, that like when I first told somebody that I had found out that I might be autistic, they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I'm like, "But why?" Like, what an absurd thing to say. Like, this is something that it's not changing anything. This is how I already am. It's about understanding myself better. And so rather than being like, "Oh, I can't tell people that I have this thing or that thing. I can't tell people I'm disabled. I can't tell people that I have autism." It's about going, "Oh, well, says who? Like, screw you, yes I can. And that's the rebellion for me. It's the pushback against this narrative of like what you should be or what you should want to be, and instead sitting with myself and thinking, no, like what am I and what do I want to be and how do I get that, and then being cool with that.
I think as I was editing through this book, that was definitely something that I loved, and I'm so pleased that you are saying this in this space, because so many young, especially younger women coming through, or younger people coming through, it doesn't have to be young women or just young people coming through, they're struggling with so much identity right now, and there's a lot of messages around who you should be and who you shouldn't be. And I think the biggest gift you can give yourself, like you say, is to go, no, who am I? Who am I to myself? Just taking a little step kind of sideways from that, but still looking at that more of a historical perspective. Throughout the book, you discuss the peculiarities of science in relation to women's health over the eons. So like, you know, some of the crazy things of the womb moving around and hysteria causing all these maladies in women. Do you see any improvements in the way women are being treated in our society by medical practitioners who may not listen or pay attention to women's lived experience of their own bodies? Or do you think it's just the same, but we've just learned, we know a little bit more than what we did from the womb wandering the body era?
Yeah, I mean, part of digging into that history was trying to answer exactly that question for myself. Like looking at the experience that I was having, like it took me 9 years to get diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and part of that was because I was a young, healthy looking woman with chronic pain that got dismissed as probably not that bad. And I while I was trying to come to terms with like that diagnosis and how long it took me to get there and all of that, I tried to just look back at like, okay, what's the history of fibro and what was it called previously, and how long did it take for people to get taken seriously with this? And you don't have to look very far back into the past for it to not exist, not be called anything, and for it to literally just be considered like, those women. And so at least we're not quite there anymore. So I think in the you know, objective answer to is it better than it was? Yes. Is it good enough? No, absolutely not. And I you know, even was just having a conversation with I had a minor surgery a few days ago, and it was a revision on a breast reduction that I got, which is, you know, in that list of things that you're not supposed to talk about, but that I don't care. And my surgeon, who is an incredible woman, absolute badass woman, was chatting with me while I was doing this surgery revision, and was talking about the experience she has working in a medical field, and the challenges that she has with research into certain areas just not existing, because a lot of the time the funding is being decided by people who have certain priorities, and then the topics that are being decided upon and the people who are like submitting to research certain areas have certain priorities, and those priorities for both of those groups of people often aren't issues that are predominantly faced by women. And so we're starting to see people talk more about things like fibromyalgia or endometriosis or PCOS or things like that, but like it is so slow, and it is much slower than the pace with which we're seeing research developing and improving in other areas. So it's trying to kind of figure that out, and that means getting more women into rooms where the research is being done, more women into the rooms where funding for the research is being decided, and more women into all rooms that they want to be in everywhere. Because otherwise we're just not going to see ongoing improvement.
Yeah, that's for sure. And do you think like with this book that it will help to encourage visibility for other women living with disabilities, or even for other pagan women living with disabilities? Because sometimes that gets kind of, you know, they kind of become a missed section of our society.
Yeah, like I think part of the book for me is demonstrating the ways in which all of these aspects of my identity are integrated with each other, and can't kind of be separated. So it is the paganism, spirituality, it's being a woman, it's being disabled, it's having neurodivergence, it's all of these different elements are all part of who make me who I am. And if somebody resonates with part of that or all of that, then that's great. And I'm hopeful that even if somebody reading the book doesn't resonate with those different topics for themselves, they can at least resonate with that idea that, okay, I'm not a woman, or I'm not disabled, or I'm not pagan, but I am something. What is that, and how do I own that, and how do I be okay with that? Because I think all of us have something in us that is not the norm or the society expectation. And so rather than continuing to try and push and mask and hide those elements of ourselves, what are all of us hiding, and how do we become more okay with those things and own that?
Yeah, and I mean, that's why this book is so important for right now, is because that is that's the overwhelming message that I got from it, was that be who you are and find out who you are. Don't just sit in it, find it out, look for it, don't just accept what society tells you should be. So as we would you were discussing in the book about, as a human society, we've been displaced from the natural world thanks to a rapidly evolving technology. But technology has kind of become somewhat integral into an integral part of our everyday life. So do you think we can kind of live a balanced life between the natural world as we progress through the technological age, or do you kind of see it as an all or nothing sort of situation, like it's either nature or it's technology? Or can we have both?
I think it's hard to know. We are living in a world that is so different from the world we lived in even a decade ago. It's so difficult to know what sort of impact the technology we're living with now is going to have on us long term. We haven't seen it for anywhere near long enough. But I'm certainly not going to be the kind of person who says, oh no, we shouldn't use technology at all, and I'm going to go and I am kind of tempted to just run away into the woods and never come back. I was going to say I didn't want to do that, but I kind of do. But the way that we live now is tied to technology, and in so many ways that's amazing. I talk about in the book the ways that science and technology have massively improved our ability to care for each other and healthcare in these really meaningful ways. It's helped us care for the world, but it's also helped us harm the world in pretty significant ways. And so how do we use this incredible power that we have in the technology we have access to in ways that are good? Like I said, I make video games for a living. I love video games. They wouldn't be possible without the sort of technology that we have now. And they're not an entirely fantastic medium. Not every single video game that comes out is great. Not every single experience people have while playing video games is great. But there are so many video games and experiences connected with them that are incredible, the types of opportunities for social interaction alone that come from video games that people wouldn't be able to get otherwise, the exposure that people have to other cultures, other types of people that they wouldn't be able to get if all they had was their kind of area around them that they could physically walk to. The amount of connectivity and globalization that we have now is amazing, and I wouldn't want to give that up. But I also think that it's just a great responsibility that we have to make sure we use it well.
And just going back to what we were talking about before, with how women have been treated throughout history, and one of the key themes throughout your book is about the misconception of witches and who witches were and what witch and women stood for back when sort of witchcraft first began to be demonized, I guess. So why do you think the time is now that we as people start reclaiming that misconception back for ourselves? As women, as pagans, as naturists, why is now the time that we start reclaiming that back?
I think that once you start to dig into witchcraft and the history of where witchcraft came from and how people started to be called witches and treated as witches and criminalized for witchcraft, you start to work out pretty quickly what it was that people were actually being criminalized for. And the being burnt at a stake is one thing, but it was similar issues of women banding together, women being outspoken, that led to women being hospitalized in mental institutions against their will for being basically rebellious and not following what their husbands say. And that is a very similar motivation in a more modern forum of like what they did to get rid of those women and get them out of the way. And so I think that thinking about historically what society has done to silence women and to get women out of the conversation, and realizing that those instances throughout history are all part of a pattern and are all part of like an ongoing desire to not let us speak about ourselves and our experience and not allow us to group together and find power in community, we can start to see the situations currently that are following that same pattern, because sometimes it can be difficult to see those things when you're in the middle of them.
I totally agree. That's some really powerful concepts there, Alayna. And I just love all of that is expressed throughout this book. It is absolutely amazing. So if you don't have a copy, you need to get your copy now because it is fabulous. So now that's the end of all my questions. And I'm going to open up the floor for everyone else. If you could just put your hand up with either if you've got your camera on, I can see visually, or with the little hand button there, and I'll take your questions as they come. Oh, yes, Deanne.
Hey, everyone, and it's so great to be here, Alayna. Congratulations. Incredible person in the world who you are. And of course, the book just reflects that. And oh my, so much in what you're talking about. And I guess what I was most interested in is the title of the book, Becoming Wild, because it seems to me you are being wild, not becoming it. You might be continuing to be wild. Like I was really getting caught on the title and listening to you. I said, oh, no, you've arrived. It's here. You are you. Look, I think you just make an incredible contribution to the world, even speaking. Yeah, being and writing, and also the idea, I think there was a word early on, so there's just a couple of observations. The other one is you're talking about, I think very early on when Emma was asking you a couple of questions about who am I and how do I fit in the world. Like I think it's not what you're trying to do anymore is to fit, and the more you don't fit, the more room there is for other people. So I just want to really deeply acknowledge you and send you lots of love and big hugs and congratulate you. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful book. That's because you're a beautiful person. And thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
Please.
On the topic of the title, I just want to say that I think I do a very good job of appearing externally like I've arrived in a way that internally I do not feel. And I think that is not a rare experience. And, you know, I only worked out that I am neurodivergent, and I was diagnosed as such about 18 months ago. And that's been a very interesting and new part of my journey. You know, I'm only 30. I'm like very, very young. I've got a lot still to figure out. And so for me, it is very much the act of becoming wild, not necessarily because I've never been it before, but because it is an ongoing reminder to not go back to being, you know, to conforming and to being back in that place. And sometimes, like I said, this started out as me writing a bunch of things for myself. I genuinely intend to take my copy of my book and highlight the things that I'm like, don't forget that, don't forget that thing you told yourself, because I do revert back a lot. And I do feel a sense of shame about some aspects of myself that are so integral because of the society I live in and because of what I've been told I should feel about myself, that it is really, really, really difficult to shake that. And so I can stand here and be like, oh, hey, like you should definitely love yourself and you should be okay with these parts of who you are, while simultaneously not being that kind to myself. And so yeah, for me, it is still the journey of becoming wild and truly, truly living the things that I want to be, not just, you know, knowing that I should be doing them, but really doing them.
Got you.
Anyone else? Are there any questions out there? Yes, Christy.
Hey, hey. Thanks for that. That was it's great hearing about the book. I don't have the book yet, but it's been great hearing about it. And I too, about 18 months ago, realized I'm neurodivergent. So hey, sister. And you too, Emma. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's been an amazing process. So it really is wonderful, hearing you go, stuff it. I'm just gonna say, who I am and what I am. And of course, the one thing I noticed is how much pushback you get. How negative people are about it, and a lot of them are actually neurodivergent themselves, but they don't realize it yet. So I was wondering if you could talk, I guess, a little bit more about, that process of, obviously you got to the stage of like talking about it with people, but you sort of deciding, I'm just going to say it anyway. I mean, maybe that was there at the beginning and you just followed through, or, maybe it was a bit unfolding and warming up to. So wondering, if you mind chatting about that a bit further.
Yeah, I think part of it is that I'm well practiced at screw it, I'm just going to say this thing I'm supposed to be ashamed of, because I had to go through that journey with being queer, and I had to go through that journey with having an invisible disability, and then I'm kind of doing it for a third time and being like, nah, whatever, like I'll add this to my list, I guess, which is, I don't know, maybe a cop-out answer, but it does feel like it is easier each time I kind of try to climb that mountain, where, the very first time I had to was around being queer, and it was literal years between working that out for myself and being happy enough to share that publicly and admit to that. And part of the only reason that I came out publicly at the time was because my doctoral thesis was related to my queer identity. And I reached a point where I really wanted to put something at the beginning about why I was writing what I was writing. And I worked with my supervisor, Ross, and he was like, you can't just be like, I'm a great ally and I just really want to write this book, because he knew, like, he wasn't like he was one of few people I'd kind of said to that, yeah, like this is because of who I am. He was like, I can't tell you what to do, and I'm not going to tell you to come out, but also, come on, like, what are you doing? I was like, yeah, fine. So that was kind of the shove that helped me get there, because I did really want to put in that book, which is also published through Revolutionaries, through Moonrise, Quilly Ever After, that short story collection, was really important to me because it was about facets of queer identity that I'd never seen when I was growing up. And so that took me ages to get there. But then I think having gone through that process and having gone through a lot of self-reflection around that helped me with kind of other aspects of who I am, because I'd already kind of decided, screw it, I'll just be who I am. That when I learned another part about myself, I was like, yeah, add that to the pile. We'll continue on. And I also think that point I just made about like the facets of identity being visible and helping you figure out where you fit in that story. I'm incredibly lucky and incredibly grateful that I have neurodivergent people in my life who made it very easy for me to learn about some of these things organically and learn about them in a way that it wasn't just me going to, a medical practitioner and having them say, have you thought about the fact you might be this? It was, that thing that you said you do predominantly because of your ADHD, I also do that. Interesting. We'll sit with that. We won't think about it too hard yet. We'll just sit with that. And that process of kind of organically finding it out about yourself and being surrounded by people that you love who also have certain things that you're kind of now figuring out whether or not you have, it's very difficult to then be like, I hate this part of myself, because if you're saying that about your ADHD or your autism and you've got like a bunch of friends around you with ADHD and autism, what are you saying about them? And so that really helped as well. Like I could go to people who were already celebrating their identities and say, me too. And they could be like, oh, yay. And so that, like, if I did go to someone who said, oh, I'm sorry, or oh, I don't understand, or oh, no, you're not, it was a lot easier to be like, all right, bite me. I'll go back to these people who like me then. Like it was, I didn't feel isolated and alone. And I think that's such an important part of it. And if my book can do that for like a single person, that is well worth the years spent writing it.
Yeah, definitely. That was, yeah. I think knowing yourself, like that whole, I think it was Plato, know thyself, not Plato, I can't think of who it was, but know thyself. I mean, that is the essence of happiness, I think, of peace in your life. Now, we've probably got a few more minutes left for a few more questions. Has there anyone, or even comments, if there's something you've heard tonight that's triggered a comment or an idea in you, please come forward and have a chat with us. So I guess we'll wrap things up now, Alayna. Is there anything you'd like to say, a final note you'd like to leave your audience with tonight?
I just think that, like, if you want to grab the book, feel free. If you just want to pick my brain about some of the things I talked about, I'm more than happy just to have a chat as well. I think that, like I said, I just wanted to dig deep into a bunch of topics that resonated with me and that were part of who I am and my identity. And I think that that means, yeah, if there is anything in this that has resonated with you, I'm the kind of person who would happily deep dive and chat with you about that as well. So let me know, and you know where to find me. But yeah, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate you all coming and hanging out with me tonight.
Thank you so much, Alayna. That's beautiful. And it looks like we have our gorgeous Walia up in the frame. Walia, any final words for us tonight?
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Emma, for hosting. Thank
pleasure.
you, Alayna, for being awesome. Like, look at this book, everyone. Look at this.
Like, it's awesome.
Amazing. And look, if you didn't already know, not that I'm trying to sell books, but it's the same size. There's clearly
they sit so nice on a shelf.
Yeah, because I made them the same size so that, when you buy both, which you can with the discount code BECOMING, and you get $15 off. I'm really not selling, but look at how they sit. Anyway, I'm just really grateful that Alayna took a chance and going with a really small, weird publisher, and that we've been able to work together now for 3 years, which is really cool. And I think there's more stuff coming in the future, maybe.
I could say the same about you, taking a chance on a small, weird writer. So I think like we fit together nicely. That's exactly the thing. Like,
yeah, it's weirdness.
So for anyone who's not aware, the part where this story, like this book went from a bunch of random thoughts that I was putting together in a Google Doc to it's actually a book now that I'm writing for other people. I was having a really bad fibromyalgia flare. I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed and had a shower at like 3 a.m. because sometimes that's the only thing that can like reset my nervous system. And while I was in the shower, my brain wrote the pitch. It just kind of came up with it. It was like, this is how I would sell this if it was going to be a thing for others. This is what it would be. And I was like, crap. So then I had to when I got out of the shower, I sent like a 3:30 a.m. pitch email to Aaliyah being like, all right, so here's this really weird thing I did. And anyway, here's like the draft introduction in one of the chapters. Have fun, bye. And I woke up the next day because like fibro makes you like foggy and it can kind of like disconnect you from reality a little bit when it's bad. I woke up the next day, basically had a response from Walia being like, yeah, freaking love this idea. And I was like, what the fuck did past me do? What did 3 a.m. Alayna do? Because it was not a thing I was writing for others until that moment. Apparently now it's a thing I'm writing for other people, and I had shared it with a publisher. Anyway, so thank you for taking a chance on me and my weird stuff the same way, I took it's a mutual relationship.
Yes. Okay, well, great. We're great. Everyone's great. Thank you everyone for showing up. I know it's like a Saturday night, and for some of you it's 4 o'clock in the morning because you live in Canada. Thank you so much. This is great, and congratulations, Alayna. Let's end it there. I'm going to stop the recording, everyone, so you can swear as much as you like as soon as I stop.
As if it was stopping us in the first place. No one gave me that memo.
Okay, but that's it for me. Everyone can go now. We're going to wrap up. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Alayna.